It is a work
How
that we
about-
just.
Okay, so we're group 5. I'm Danny,
I'm Wes.
I'm Tammy.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Adrian.
I'm Jason.
and we're presenting on the Valenzuela readings this week.
So for chapter 1 in the book, Valenzuela conducts a study at Seguin High School, and at the start of the chapter talks about subtractive assimilation being basically divesting youth of important social and cultural resources, and because of that it shows a generational decline in academics. Also she mentions caring and not caring in its correlation to education. Basically it mentions in the book how school centers around aesthetic caring and not very much authentic caring, which also trickles down to it not building on top of the individual's skills and attributes that students have. There's also another notion, social capital theory, being the sum of connections with no money value. The sum of connections with no money value, the definition Bonus came up with. And yeah, basically it's just here, some connections with people. And in the book it also mentions that students do well in school when other peers also do so. And also it says that immigrant youth do better academically than the generations after, so like second generation, third generation to come, with the exception of college-bound students. So this is mostly limited just to the regular track students. And there's also an idea called dual frames of reference, which basically immigrants can do better because they can compare the present status to life back home and they know what to do better and what not to do. And there's also Ogbu's cultural inversion, which was like students, and students like to avoid being white by by indulging in certain activities like gangs and all that. And yeah. Take it away. Oh, it's on.
Okay, so chapter 2 was mostly going over the history of Houston Independent School District, or HISD, and Seguin High School, particularly in the HISD. So she talks about the demographic shift that happened, particularly from the 1950s through the 70s and 80s, where the town shifted from mostly white, middle, upper class community members to mostly Latino, lower class community members. And this actually also affected the academic achievement at Seguin High School from a model school towards a really poorly achieving school. Then she also talks about the 1970 court ruling, which caused protests and a lot of white flight. So basically, the judge decided that school desegregation needed to happen in HISD, but the way that he went about it was he considered Mexican Americans to be white, and that they needed to be integrated with African American students. So this caused mass protests because Mexican Americans wanted to be considered as a ethnic minority, and they weren't by this judge. And so it caused a lot of protests that lasted until 1973, but the schools were forced to integrate anyway, and eventually in 1973 the Supreme Court ruled that Mexican Americans and Latino Americans could be considered a minority group that are a marginalized group. So then she goes on to say that magnet schools started to become developed, especially after desegregation in the Houston School District. And they were either developed independently or within schools and school programs. And while they benefited a lot of students, they mostly benefited white, upper middle class students. In 1989, students at Seguin High School arranged a student walkout. Mostly it was triggered by 7 weeks of scheduling issues at the beginning of the school year, which it was really common to have scheduling issues, and there had been this huge growth in student body in the last couple years, especially due to the desegregation. So there wasn't enough there weren't enough classrooms, there wasn't enough space in the cafeteria, the food was awful, it apparently like made kids sick. There were scheduling issues where kids were literally told to go to like a broom closet or an empty classroom for classes. Teachers didn't have any textbooks, some classrooms didn't have any desks or chairs or books or computers. And so all of this was something that was really weighing on the students. So in 1989, the students organized a walkout and started protests. Eventually, a lot of the things were addressed by the district, but one thing that was failed to be addressed and actually wasn't even talked about